Welcome to this episode of the Digital Disruption podcast, brought to you by Novus Strategy and Consulting, with myself, Chris Williams, and Pete Gatenby. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about digitisation of the home buying process and how technology is revolutionising it, improving it, and making it better for all. So let's get straight into it.
Great. So you're the expert within Novus when it comes to all things mortgages and the mortgage industry. So can you, for the audience at home, can you provide a bit of an overview of the mortgage industry today, digitally, and how digital transformation is really affecting the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing to say is that traditionally it's been quite slow in the uptake of digitisation for two reasons. One is the landscape is a very complex one, and the second reason is that there's lots of stakeholders in it. So the current state of play at the moment is that I would describe it's gone through its first initial phases of digitisation, which has been a very vertical approach. So you've had vendors come into the market, those and incumbent players digitise their processes, but what they've done is they've digitised vertical elements of the overall process, and what that's led to is quite fragmented digitised services. Now that's a good start. That's very traditional. It happens across sectors, as you and I well know. So now we're in sort of the next phase. So the next phase is where these the market itself, the sector, if you will, is now going into a phase of a more collaborative and taking a more horizontal approach of bringing these services together and digitising them at the same time. So it's in its second phase of maturity, I would describe. And I guess almost if you took the frameworks that we use, the Novus Digital Index, for example, I'd say if we looked at that and those sort of different sorts of phases, it's entering that level of maturity now where it can start to do things at scale a little bit more. There's lots to do. It's by no means anywhere near finished. But as you break down the sector and you break down the market, I feel we're entering a level of maturity now where one, collaboration is really starting to kick in, which is great, and I think is a credit to the industry. Secondly, we're starting to see a more holistic view being taken of the overall conveyancing process, bearing in mind there's lots of stakeholders in it, as I said before, and the digitisation of the services that underpin that process are starting to be looked at and reimagined. Pete, I think that's what I'd say. They're starting to be reimagined because there's no point building a better version of the past.
Yeah.
You know, we've got to reimagine how things are done, and they're starting to get on that journey. And that's where I'd say, honestly, where the market is right now.
It's interesting you talk about that, right? We sometimes talk about dual transformations.
Yes.
And transformation A, obviously taking place. Transformation B is what you've just touched on just there, is finding new ways to do new things, right? And not just new ways to do the old things. So that's really interesting. In what ways is digital transformation affecting the speed or accuracy or efficacy of the mortgage process and funds and that side of things?
That's an interesting question, and I'll probably break it down because it's a multifaceted process with numbers of stakeholders, a number of different stakeholders involved. I think what we're seeing initially in the upfront part of this is a lot of work being done in the initial data collection, but there's still more to do. There's maturity in machine learning, helping with decisioning and things like that, and we're seeing some good stuff happening there. There's lots of innovation that's taking place, which is all great, but there are elements of the process which are still quite far behind when you say contrast it with other areas of financial services and where fintechs have really sort of took off sort of more in traditional banking and lending and things like that. So as you break it down up front, there's a lot that's happening in the sort of middle area around where the conveyance takes place. You know, law firms have digitised and automated a bit more, but there's more to do there, especially. But then at the other end, where the transaction completes, there are other things that happen, such as the lodgement of title, which requires a land registry. You know, there's lots of transformation and digitisation that needs to get up to speed in there to help this process be reimagined even further. Finally, on that, there's also how the movement of money is managed and handled, and there's work being done in and around that area. That's another area of innovation which is taking place. So, as I say, lots to do, and it's very fragmented, but it's coming together. It's going to take time, but it's definitely improving.
It's interesting though, and we see this a lot in regulated markets, right? As financial services rightly is that it sometimes creates barriers, but it almost seems to me at the moment that the regulators are beginning to transform themselves, and that's actually stimulating transformation in the industry as well from an overall standpoint, and really kind of fueling those steps forward.
But yeah, I think I'd say from an FCA standpoint, they've got some great things going on to help propel innovation. But there are other regulated or other regulators within this space that I think probably could also. They're all working hard, but there's more that can be done. Is what I'd say to enable that.
Just going back to your point around speed and efficiency, what's being done at the moment? Obviously, we're within reason of what we can talk about within the realms of the public domain, but what's being done at the moment? Where's the market going? Where's the industry going? What exciting things are happening at the moment?
Okay, so breaking that down, there's a number of exciting things that are happening in more around collaboration. So I think what we're seeing with vendors and players within the market is they're collaborating a lot more. Traditionally, this was definitely an environment that we've seen in the last 10 years over the projects that we've been involved in, whereby getting people to collaborate multi-party has been complex because people were quite closed. That attitude is changing. That's the first thing. And so that's really advancing things. And I'm quite excited about that, because what that does is that doesn't stifle innovation. It propels it, because I think it's better that people work together than they do independently. Secondly to that, I think the other thing that's helping speed things up is the fact that we've got digitisation of those vertical areas that I touched on at the start. What's accelerating that is the fact that, going back to the collaboration point, is that people are now beginning to reimagine what the as-is state to what the future state could be. And there's a lot more open-mindedness towards that, again, propelled by the fact that you've got multiple parties within the industry collaborating more. And I think that's key, not just within this space, but in all areas of financial services. That collaboration is really what kind of helps to drive things along. The third thing that's helping to speed things up is ways of working and how people are approaching the development of products within this space. And so over the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years, we've seen an acceleration of agile adoption, and a credit to, not just delivery teams, but actually executive units who have recognized that, it's not just about techies and understanding what agile ways of working are, but actually how we leverage agile ways of working across areas of the organization, because that also is what's driving the speed of which the industry is digitizing elements of it. And then my final point would be more around the innovation and reimagining what the as-is states, what could be. Whilst there's a lot of digitization taking place, what we're also seeing now is we've got incumbent players in the market who've got access to lots of data, access to lots of intelligence, and all the necessary domain knowledge, actually looking outside of the market to skills and talent, bringing them in and reimagining what could be. And I think there's some fantastic things that are being done in and around there across each sort of core area of the conveyancing space, from whether it's smart contracts, the way that money's moved, how automation can be brought into the conveyancing process, allowing fee earners in law firms to be more focused. The other thing is, I'd say, is that people are looking at this in a far more customer-centric way, i.e. let's put the customer at the heart of it, and how do we kind of make this a much better experience for them. So there's lots happening and there's lots going on there.
Absolutely. But on the flip side, what's slowing down that process? What's hindering it? How could the industry or people operating in that industry do better?
Look, I've credited the collaboration.
Yep.
But I do think there's probably more that could be done there in an open-minded way. And I think probably what's slowing this sector down a bit, or what has traditionally slowed it down, is the fact that because it's become fragmented. And I think this is where, organizations like ours, or the vendors that play in this space, we all play a part in educating how to collaborate and those ways of working that I described before, so that there isn't lots of fragmentation. Because I think specifically in the law firm space, there's a lot of, these are very traditional industries. They're very process orientated and process driven. And if they don't have clarity around what technology solutions they should be leveraging and in the order for which they should be leveraging, almost like a bit of a blueprint or a roadmap to implement this stuff, then it becomes very problematic. And so, law firms, for example, there's a lot of them, but they all have different digital maturity levels, as all organizations do. But vendors have got to recognize that and have got to make it easier for them to consume and adopt digital services in a very non-fragmented way, so that this stuff can be joined up. That's, I think, probably the biggest inhibitor at the moment, and why I've sort of described it as this next phase of transformation is moving to that B phase, which is effectively taking that more holistic view, reimagining, but collaborating together to drive real innovation through for the better, for the benefit of all.
Great. So what advice would you offer to anyone in the industry who may be skeptical around adopting digital technologies or transforming with a digital as a real driver?
Cards on the table. I don't really think there's probably people out there that are skeptical of the transformation element. I think, having worked closely in this sector now for a number of years, that I see everybody wanting to adopt digital, wanting to innovate, wanting to drive things forward. But it comes back to what I said earlier. I think we all play a part in collaborating better. So there are going to be people that are skeptical, perhaps, of certain ways of doing things. Change isn't easy, change is difficult, and change is hard. So there's definite change on the horizon. And so if we frame this in the way that, look, there's going to be organizations out there, whether they're law firms, intermediaries, lenders, brokers, whatever, that are within this space, that are looking at new innovations and thinking, don't like the look of that, that's never going to happen. My invitation to those people would be this: think carefully, take a step back, and really start to reimagine how things could be and collaborate around that. Because change is never easy, but it is coming, and there is disruption coming to this space and to this sector. It's evolving, it's growing. They're in for a tough time. Markets are shifting and changing. That's unquestionably at the moment with both with interest rate rises, slowdown in things. So as with anything, there are cycles. So there are going to be tough periods. So whilst I think there are people there that are most definitely adopting digital services, there will be elements of skeptics around wanting to almost change too much, and from a reimagining how the home buying process should be. And I think what I'd say there is, again, my invitation to those people is to take a step back and actually be part of that reimagining journey and putting the customer at the heart of it, because actually, nothing stands still. And what's important is that this, in all aspects of life, digital will transform everything, and we have to take the opportunity now and be part of that transformation. Don't be an observer within it. So get involved, get collaborating. That'd be my main sort of points around that.
That's interesting, and actually segues quite nicely into what I'm thinking about next. Is there's clearly some quite exciting things happening. What's coming? What's going to change in the mortgage process? What's going to make me excited about that next mortgage that I take out?
Well, it depends how quick you're going to be taking your mortgage out. But I think, as I said earlier, there's a number of things that are happening. I think in the upfront arena, the way that the data sharing, I think, is ultimately going to improve. From a benefit standpoint, the speed and efficiency of this stuff it is improving across the board. The digitisation of key elements of it is helping speed things up. That's more in the short to medium term, whether that's from the broker journey all the way through to the lending experience. I mean, you can see now, you've got lenders advertising on social media channels to get your decisions in principles quickly via your mobile device. All of those customer experiences on the front end are improving and continue to improve. What I'm more excited about is kind of the medium to long term, about what's going to happen within the actual conveyancing process and how that'll get better, and how digital is going to transform areas of that as more collaboration takes place, all the way through to how the transfer of money at the far end of the process. There's some really exciting things coming down the track. They're not round the corner, they're certainly far down the line. in terms of time. But they're the sort of key things I'm really excited about, and the fact that the customer is right at the heart of it and improving those journeys.
Finally, Chris, you're clearly an expert in this area. What are your top tips for people working in the mortgage space, looking, perhaps digitizing that experience right this second? What's your 3 top tips for those guys today?
3 top tips: data, organize the data, analyze it, get it right, because those that are incumbent in the market, I think, have got such an opportunity to accelerate their journeys. So that'd be number 1. Secondly, it's people. There's lots of great people in the industry for certain, but it's the people that are driving the transformation. And so it's what's really important is to augment teams and the right people around this process. And don't do that in isolation. I know perhaps overuse the word a little bit, but collaborate. But I mean that internally as well. So don't do this in silo. There's a number of players in this space that have done this very, very well. One of the best ones works with us, as you would expect. But the way to do this is to collaborate internally and remove those silos and augment teams properly so that they're really focused on solving problems that are genuine issues that drive out value. Don't focus on issues that you think are problems. Solve problems that are really there for the customer, whoever it is that you're building your services for. That's the second thing, and augmenting teams around that. And I think the third thing for me would be the importance of really understanding the value stream mapping process. And again, we've touched on this in a number of episodes before, but the ability to be able to very quickly walk through your user flows and user journeys and just look at how you can do some quick wins with digitization. Do that process. They're the 3 key things for me, because I think a lot of people, especially with the advent of sort of AI in the last sort of 12 months and how that's kind of blowing up, just take the time to look at the customer journey. Don't get too drawn into the silver, shiny object stuff. Whilst AI is important, and there are definitely things you could be doing, look at the customer journey and just make small incremental improvements. Those are the key 3 things for me that I'd be saying to people right now.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Digital Disruption podcast, brought to you by Novus Strategy and Consulting, myself, Chris Williams, and Pete Gatenby. If there's anything in this episode that you'd like to find out more about, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via the usual methods. Indeed, if there's any of the frameworks that we've spoken about, you should be able to download some of those directly from our website. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you again soon.